For today's history video on Memorial Day, I'd like to talk about the infinite adaptability of the American military. We've all celebrated our military achievements, the technological edge the Pentagon has been able to maintain, and the ingenious way that we've foiled our adversaries and their ever-evolving tactics. But what to me is more impressive is that the military has responded to public opinion and to the need to fight a war on behalf of a democracy with an open and critical media criticizing their own army. And rather than try to ignore that, they've adjusted to it very, very successfully. It all began with the Vietnam War, where the military basically didn't give a damn what people felt. They marginalized the anti-war protesters. They insisted on having a draft, which was largely for political purposes. The left wanted a citizen army. They didn't want an all-professional military. And the government didn't want to pay soldiers enough so that enough would enlist. So they maintained this draft that was hugely unpopular, and the Vietnam War discredited the military and gave them a horribly bad name, both in terms of the cause, in terms of their tactics, and in terms of the ravaging of much of the civilian population in South Vietnam. Not as bad as the communists did, but still, we're the democracy and we were held accountable. So in response to the Vietnam War, the military changed its entire strategic and tactical approach. The biggest change was that they took the pilots out of airplanes, and they used drones and remotely piloted aircraft to accomplish a lot of the bombing and other missions that formerly had been accomplished by manned aircraft. And because they did that, the need for fighter escorts to protect the bombers from enemy aircraft was also vastly reduced. That was in response to the POW issue. In the Vietnam War, after a while, we continued the war, not in the hopes of securing freedom for South Vietnam or defeating the communists, but in hopes of getting our POWs back and our missing in actions accounted for. And that kept the war going for 2 years while those issues were debated. Same thing had happened in the Korean War. So the military decided to eliminate the POW issue. Most of the POWs were not battlefield surrenders. They were in airplanes that were shot down, like John McCain's. So by taking the pilot out of the airplane, we eliminated that problem. And now, except for the occasional person like Sergeant Bendal, who may have deliberately let himself be captured, we don't really have POWs anymore because our military thought it through. They also have been tremendously skilled at minimizing American casualties. And when something new comes up, like the improvised explosive devices, they reshape their technology in such a way as to avoid the combat deaths that those cause. Of course, there were over 3,000 men and women killed, both in Afghanistan and Iraq combined, and actually combining them, you're up around 4,000 or 5,000. But still, it wasn't the 58,000 that were killed in the Vietnam War, because the military learned not to try to tough it out, but instead to change the tactics and change the technology to deal with that. They also developed a fighting doctrine that minimized casualties, that made sure that no soldiers were ever left behind, and everybody was evacuated, and a whole series of steps to be sensitive to public opinion. They even, in the Iraq War, embedded correspondence in military units so that they could see the war firsthand and, frankly, see it through our eyes rather than neutrally or independently. So hats off to our military for what it's done. It's a real challenge to maintain a fighting machine in the middle of a democracy, both in terms of funding, in terms of tactics, and in terms of it looking good on television. But we've really succeeded in doing that. So let's be grateful to our military. Thanks for watching.